If there is a vegetable, they will make a leather out of it. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie and I do impact analysis deep dives. I look at available data and make overviews on how we as consumers can reduce our environmental footprint as much as possible while still thriving, being happy, all that jazz. I recently talked a lot about leather. I've been a vegan myself for almost 10 years. So leather comes up quite a bit and I will talk a little bit more about how I navigate this myself. But one of the things that I mentioned in my previous video was that maybe we should talk about the different kinds of alternative leathers, plant-based leathers, vegan leathers. What are the better options? What are the worst options? So that's what we're gonna do today. This is the overview that if you're confused about alternative leathers, you should watch this video. Before we can get into the alternative leathers, I feel like we have to look at the source material. Leather. It's not called leather, but you know, cow hides. I want to acknowledge that we have used cow hides and animal skins for thousands of years. But I don't really think it makes sense to talk about those traditions necessarily when what we are criticizing is the industrial animal agricultural industry. This industry, even though it is so extensive and one of the most polluting on the planet, is fairly new. It doesn't make sense as a reply or argument for leather to say we've always done this when the way we're doing it now is so incredibly detrimental to the planet and very far removed from any original traditions. Leather today relies on livestock. The vast majority of leather that we are producing, leather is a byproduct of the meat industry. Sometimes it's the other way around, but that is not the majority of what we're seeing. The animal agricultural sector accounts for 11 to 17% of global greenhouse gas emissions. If that sounds like a number just thrown out there, it makes sense to compare it to other things, right? So what I like to compare it to is the aviation sector. Airplane travel accounts for 2.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It is a massive thing. Other than greenhouse gas emissions, the animal agricultural sector is also responsible for deforestation, for groundwater pollution, for soil depletion, and the list just really goes on. Whether you are vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, or if you eat anything that's put in front of you, there's really no way around acknowledging that we are producing beyond our planetary boundaries. So whether you think it's wrong or not really doesn't change the fact that the planet can simply not sustain this production. Breeding and maintaining livestock isn't the only part of leather production that comes with quite the impact. When cow hides are processed into leather, they are tanned. And tanneries use really harsh chemicals that are often flushed directly out into groundwater, water systems, soil. Many of them still use chrome today, which is also incredibly toxic. And I will do this with literally any textile. We also have to talk about the people that are being exploited in this process. Garment workers in India, China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, in the fast fashion industry, as well as often, unfortunately, also in the luxury garment industry, are not subjected to safe working conditions, safety equipment, safety protocols, clean air, any of the sort. I will recommend anyone who buys clothes ever to look into how garment workers are treated in this industry. I have another video about that and several videos about that. I will link them down below because that is a big part of it as well. On the upsides, and we want to be nuanced here, so if we are to talk about the positive parts of leather, it is a durable material that can last for a really long time. It tends to be biodegradable. That doesn't mean that all leather is biodegradable. That does really depend on the chemical processing and if synthetic components are used in that processing. It's a biodegradable, durable product that is easy to repair, which tends to be the upside that most people look at. But when it comes to all those downsides, both from environmental perspectives, as well as from health perspectives, as well as from ethical perspectives, it does make sense to look into alternative fabrics. And I would like to be the first to admit that it can be really difficult to navigate what vegan or plant-based leather products are good and which ones are bad and which ones are misleading you and which ones are greenwashing you and which ones are legit. Unfortunately, a lot of these alternative leathers come with their own problems that I think consumers should be aware of. Let's start with the most common alternative to leather, aka faux leather, synthetic leather, pleather, short for plastic leather, because that is exactly what it is. Most synthetic plastic leathers are made from PU or PVC. It is by far the cheapest and most easily available because the fast fashion industry loves a cheap shit quality garment. So now we're just taking a fossil fuel derived plastic product and we're pushing it onto consumers who value ethics and sustainability, and we're calling it vegan leather. Now this has given all plant-based, all leather alternatives, all vegan leathers a really bad rep, because this is by far the first thing most skeptics as well as most complainers like myself, we think of when we hear vegan leather. I think plastic leather because it is the most available product on the market. And one of the main reasons why I'm still so pissed about it is the fact that they were successful in marketing a product that still exploits garment workers as ethical. Wild stunt. There is overall no sustainability or ethical sourcing throughout this entire supply chain. It's just the absence of using something that makes it ethical. And obviously that is not how it works. At all. But have you ever thought about how leather and pleather actually compares? There are quite a few different studies on this, and I would like to highlight this one. This dataset estimates that animal leather emits 17 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per square meter, while pleather emits 15.8 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per square meter. So not a massive difference, really. How about that? Oh, what is that? Oh, so it's only during manufacturing. Oh, okay, that makes more sense then. We add the emissions from start to finish, which we really should, because livestock farming and breeding is kind of the reason why the cowhide is there in the first place. This comparison starts to look a lot less flattering, taking the emissions of cow leather to a whopping 110 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per square meter. So now it makes more sense. Sure. This means that a pair of shoes made from cow leather has a carbon footprint of roughly 40 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, while a pair of shoes made from a PU synthetic leather has an impact of 5.8 kilograms of CO2. So does this mean that we're just hating on plastic while it's actually the most sustainable option? Wait a second. If we're considering the whole supply chain of leather, from breeding and maintaining livestock, shouldn't we then also consider the whole supply chain of the fossil fuel industry into the impact of plastic-derived leather? Wouldn't that also be fair? Because the fossil fuel sector depend on the sale of plastic in order to thrive, and that includes materials like polyester, nylon, and pleather. And the thing is with these synthetic materials is that they never break down and will ultimately always end up in landfill, where they will never biodegrade. They will just become smaller bits of plastic, but they will never degrade into nothing. They will, however, contribute with methane emissions while being in the landfill. Plastic-based leather, as well as all plastic materials, also contribute to microplastic pollution. And what's even worse, or equally as bad, it's not made to last. The premise of fast fashion, cheap quality leather imitation products is that they are designed to be discarded again. If you've ever had some of this material in your hands, you will know how easy it is to chip and break and crack. It is made to be thrown away and repurchased over and over again. Even if leather alternatives have lower emissions during its production and even during its use phases with consumers, if it's designed to be discarded and bought again and again and again, those CO2 benefits will be completely lost. But luckily, this isn't the only alternative available. I'm going to divide these into some subcategories just to make this easier for all of us, including myself. Maybe mostly myself. Let's start by talking about fruit and plant leather. This category has leather products made from apple, like apple skin. It has Pinatex made from pineapple leaves, corn leather, cactus leather, leaf leather, grape leather, olive leather. If there is a vegetable, they will make a leather out of it. What sets these leathers apart is the fact that they use waste materials or byproducts from other established industries. Grape leather is made from waste from the wine industry. Every 10 liters of wine can generate as much as 2.5 liters of waste, such as shells, skins, cores, which are usually just thrown away. Reworking them into another material that adds value rather than being a cost is a great idea. But honestly, if we can use resources in new ways, I'm all for that all the time. This kind of innovation is, I think, intensely interesting. Apple leather is often made with discarded apples not fit for supermarkets. One of the most commonly used apple leather suppliers is the Italian company Frumat, who offers a material containing 50% apple waste and 50% PU. So 50% apple waste and 50% plastic. Pinatex is plant-based leather made from pineapple leaves. It actually takes almost 500 pineapple leaves to make 1 square meter of Pinatex, which sounds like a lot, but because this is always a waste product that will never be utilized in other ways, this tends to actually just be a good thing, even if the amount of material sounds kind of wild. And cactus leather is made by the company Deserto. According to this Guardian article, it's used by H&M and Everlane, and the cactus leaves are grown without chemicals and irrigation on a ranch in Mexico, which sounds great. There are a few mushroom-based leathers available as well, 2 companies that I know of. And they make their leather from the root of the fungi mycelium, which is grown into a foam-looking substance, which is then tanned like leather and giving a coating of PU. Now, this is where I think it gets exciting. We can also make a natural rubber leather. This type of leather is made by the startup Natural Fiber Welding and is entirely plastic-free and 100% plant-based. This material is made of natural tree rubber, rice, cork, and coconut waste. From what I found in my research, this was actually the only alternative plant-based leather that didn't have any plastic whatsoever. My least favorite leather alternative has to be PET plastic bottles recycled, remarketed as sustainable fabrics. We have seen this with many different types of fabrics where you take plastic bottles and you recycle it or upcycle it into garments. I have seen such high praise for plastic bottles turned into vegan leather, and I'm over it. Let it be known. This is some of the praise that I've seen. This is a little quote from an article I found about it. Innovative, eco-friendly vegan leather that isn't just stylish but good for the planet is made from, believe it or not, recycled plastic bottles. Once broken down into plastic flakes, a waterproof and lightweight polyester fiber creates 100% recycled plastic leather. Yay, queen! So the reason why I don't appreciate this at all is that PET plastic, the type of plastic that we use to make water bottles, for instance, is a very high quality plastic material that can be remade into many different things. For instance, remade into plastic water bottles again. What is actually happening when we take a type of plastic like PET and we make it into a garment is that we downcycle it. Whatever else the marketing tells you, it is downcycling. For the simple reason being plastic vegan leather, it reaches its final destination for what that material can do. The next thing you can do with it is turn it into smush that you can put into a sleeping bag or into you can turn it sort of into like a fleece coat, but you will downcycle it from there, taking the material and making it worth less and less and less. Meanwhile, the starting point was a really high quality plastic material that you could reuse, that was food safe, that could do lots of things. The rebranding of downcycling as an eco-friendly innovation technique is just so played out, and I cannot believe that we are still seeing this kind of stuff. So let this be a general reminder that if we can avoid taking high quality plastic and turning it into low quality garments, we should avoid doing that. I want to talk about my overall verdict when it comes to plant-based vegan leather alternatives. Overall, I think a lot of the different techniques and materials that are being made, especially so from leaves, plants, fruits, etc. They take something that is typically wasted and they turn it into something that is more valuable, which overall I really like to see. 1/3 of all food is wasted, so if we can take any kind of material from those supply chains where it would otherwise have been burnt or in landfill, rotting away, and we can make it into something useful, that is a great idea. That is always a great idea. However, even when intentions are good, these products, typically speaking, in most cases, still contain a certain level of plastic. Generally, the plant matter is processed into a substance that is applied to a textile and coated with PU for water resistance, durability, making these products a kind of vegan textile plastic sandwich. Some use bioplastics, which is plastic mainly derived from renewable resources rather than fossil fuels. But bioplastics are still plastic. The levels of synthetics in these products varies considerably based on whether the textile backing is natural or polyester and the overall quantity of PU used, but it can sometimes reach 50% or higher, which means that even if you're being sold a plant-based product, in many cases what you're buying is still a plastic product, a little plant-based there sprinkled on top of it. I think it's important for us as consumers to be aware of the fact that a large part of this market is very focused on how these things are sold to consumers. If you're selling the idea and the feeling of a biodegradable, sustainable product, and you're really just selling plastic, you're not being fair, you're being misleading, even if the intentions are good. Remember Deserto, the cactus leather company? They do not disclose the kind of liquid polymer that they're using. They're describing it as a biopolymer, but because of industry secrets, they're not telling you specifically what it's made out of. However, this report from 2021 investigated the presence of chemicals and plastics in a range of leather alternatives, and it found that Deserto's plant-based leathers also contained PU. and 5 other restricted substances. On the other hand, there's reishi, one of the fungi producing plant-based leathers. Reishi produces their leather by growing it entirely on top of cotton sheets, which is pretty interesting. And during a peer-reviewed life cycle assessment from 3 years ago, reishi has less than 1% plastic content, which is the lowest I have seen in any PU hybrids, which honestly is what these plant-based leathers often should be classified as, because it is a plant-based plastic hybrid. The LCA suggested that reishi's carbon footprint is 2.7 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per square meter, which is just 8% of real leather's carbon footprint. So that's significant. That is fantastic. And what is more, it is also significantly less than most plant-based plastics. It's sort of on the same line with Pinatex, which is also one of the lowest emitting materials. So just because something is marketed as plant-based leather doesn't mean that plastic isn't a part of the equation as well. Now, I don't expect this relatively new field in the industry to get everything right the first time. These technologies are improving all the time. We have had leather for a really long time, and expecting alternatives to nail everything in the first go without using any synthetic materials is a little bit of a reach. It's fantastic when it happens, but I will also give these companies the grace of learning as they go along. But what I think is important from a consumer perspective is that we are not so easily swayed by marketing and promises of sustainability. If what you want as a consumer is simply to find alternatives so you don't have to wear animal skin, then all of these materials will be equally good options. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily sustainable. Environmentalism and veganism isn't a complete overlap. Something can be vegan and unsustainable easily. There is a massive spectrum of quality when it comes to these materials here, and whenever we look at the garment industry, what we really should be focusing on doesn't change. We need more transparency, we need easier supply chains to understand, less opaqueness within the supply chains, better wages for people that work in the supply chain, but most importantly, just fewer products. If your business is built on an overconsumption model, you can fuck off. We shouldn't be so eager to settle for empty marketing calories, if that makes sense. So what's the best option? Like, what should we do going forward? What's the recommendation? I can tell you how I'm choosing to do this. Then you can do your own thing. You might not agree with this, but this is sort of where I'm at. I don't buy new leather products. I haven't for years and years. I've been vegan for almost 10 years, and I don't support any production of new leather. The production is shit, the impact is insane, but I do wear leather that is already in circulation, leather that I have inherited, that I've gotten already, that I've bought before going vegan, and if I find a good quality product in a vintage store, in a secondhand store, I will also use that. I don't have a problem with that personally. If you don't want to do that, that is completely okay as well. As you can see, there is a spectrum of products that we can choose instead of that. But overall, using what is already in circulation just also tends to be, for many consumers, a better idea than buying new products, especially if those new products are just pleather from fast fashion companies. That is the other option. I would just stick to using what is already there. Unless what is already there is plastic bottles that's being resold as leather, then obviously not. I understand if you feel that this is hard to navigate, because it is. Just overall, what we can do as consumers is that we can demand transparency, we can ask questions, we can look for documentation, both in terms of wages for garment workers as well as for material transparency. What is the kind of materials that's being used? How were they made? It tends to be so that the companies that are putting in all the effort to do it in the best way possible are really keen on telling you. And they have documentation, they have third-party certificates, they open up their supply chain so that you can see. And the people that don't do all that hard work will typically just slap a sustainable, eco-friendly, leafy sticker on it and call it a day. If you cannot find any documentation other than it's probably not as sustainable as you think. But most importantly, just reduce the amount of products that we buy. If you don't have winter boots and you need winter boots, obviously you need winter boots. The main problem with the garment industry altogether, whether we're talking leather or vegan leather, any kind of material, is the pace and volume with which these products are produced. We are producing too much. Maybe we have to scale back on the vibes purchases. Buying with intention and being ethical with your purchases is not only about where we spend our money, the volume of things we consume, how well we maintain our products, how well we can repair them when they break. All that stuff is a part of it as well. And overall, I think it makes a lot more sense to be so much more focused on these parts of it. Because if you don't buy a lot of stuff, where that stuff comes from isn't necessarily as important. It is how we use things that make it sustainable. in reality. Anyway, that is everything for this video. Let me know what your solutions are. If you have any leather products, if you have tried any alternative vegan leather products and what you thought of them, let me know how you would tackle this in the comments down below, and let's share with the group. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.